Welcome back, everyone. Today what I've got behind me is a Vermeer SC252 stump grinder that needs a little bit of help. So I had picked up this stump grinder locally, and the guy who had it before me said it was low hours, but something happened with the engine before and it needed to be fixed. So he got it from a friend of his who already had pulled the engine off and didn't have time to fix it, sold it to this guy. He didn't have time to fix it, so he sold it to me. So what I'm going to be trying to do in this episode is getting the engine back on the stump grinder, getting it running, and hopefully allowing it to grind stumps once more. As you can see, this is where the engine should have been on the stump grinder, and right now I just have a mess of wires, brackets, plates, everything's just kind of hanging here. The clutch and pulley system's just kind of hanging for the stump grinder itself. I did have this lovely assortment of random nuts and bolts that came with it, so hopefully some of those will be useful for me when I'm trying to get this thing back together. And then this is what came, the engine that came with it when I bought it. This is a Kohler 25 horsepower engine, pretty common engine. You can usually find these kinds of engines on Exmark lawnmowers, as they're very popular for that. So now that I've got everything at least kind of sorted, I'm kind of figuring out what I need to do. The biggest thing we're going to have to figure out to do is going to be the wiring. So Vermeer does have this nice thing where they'll send you, if you send in the model and serial number of the stump grinder you have, they'll send you some manuals. I did that. I did not get any manuals. So I will be just kind of winging it through trying to get all of this stuff back together. Hopefully I do it correctly. So let's get to it. So I don't know if this is their correct hole, but I am just kind of guessing based on the witness marks on the plate. Alright, so now that I have the stump grinder all cleaned up where the engine's going to sit, I have the plate bolted onto the bottom of the engine. I got most of it cleaned up. Now I need to lift the engine and put it on the stump grinder. It is not light, let me tell you. All right, that wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it would be. So I've got sitting on here that plate that I installed earlier. It has these tabs for this adjuster, and that's so that you can adjust the tension on the belts on this side. So this clutch assembly I'll then have to put on here. That's how you adjust belt tension. And also this hydraulic pump gets bolted on as well. I believe it gets bolted on first. So now that I have this resting on here, what I'm going to do is I'll put some bolts in through the plate to mount it to the arm itself. And then I can start to try to figure out how the hydraulic pump and the clutch all line up. And this is, it's actually interesting. I've never seen this. It's an electronically activated clutch. So that's pretty neat. But now time for bolting. So you can see now I have the bracket all bolted down. Hopefully that's about where it needs to be. I'll have to figure that out once I get this pulley on. But now I need to mount the hydraulic pump and its pulley system, and that is going to mount directly onto the back of the engine using those bolt holes. At least that's the best I can figure, so let's get to that. Now I don't want to put that on tight because I still have to get the pulley on for the hydraulic pump. But now I need to get the clutch and main drive pulley on. This is keyed. So I do need to get the keyway lined up. Yeah, she's being a bugger. So the end of the shaft and the inside of the pulley are a little rusted. So I'll take some Scotch-Brite, see if I can clean them up. All right, so as you saw, I did have to loosen up the entire engine, slide it forward some, but cleaning it up and then putting a little bit of WD-40 on worked perfectly. It slid right on, no problem. So now I had to get this key stock. I cut this down off of a 12-inch piece because the key stock that was left with this was missing. So I did test fit this already, and the key stock does slide in relatively nice. So we got that there. Give it a little tap in. Like such. We have this pulley that goes on the end. It also has a little area to engage in the key stock. Of course, I did not clean it prior, so it is a little stiff. And then we have our bolt. Again, let's give a little lube. Just so I don't gall the threads out. All right, so the engine is all mounted up. Pulley is on as it should be. Tension the belt as best I could. Hydraulic pump pulley is on along with belt, also tensioned. So now I just need to put the covers back on this. But the biggest problem I'm gonna have to come into now is I have to figure out wiring. This is an absolute mess. I think this might be the key from the old engine. I'm not sure. I've got wires over here that I need to figure out what they go to and how to wire it. And I also lost the positive and negative battery terminal cable, so I'll have to make some of them. I also don't have a battery, so I will have to get one of those as well. So now on to wiring.
in this company-wide contest. Each winner gets a call from Beasley. Be sure to answer your phone contest. 3 and 5 p.m. with your next shot tomorrow morning with the President Steve Show at 8 a.m. Okay, it's 5:01, almost 5:02 on the clock, which means you get about 13 more minutes to get in this hour's keyword. Again, is buy. B.
So as you saw, I was able to get the stump grinder running, but I only hot wired it. I've been having one heck of a time trying to get the wiring figured out on this thing. And last night I was finally able to do some research and really find out exactly how this is supposed to be wired. And let me show you, because I know I had a hard time finding the information, so I just want to make sure that the information is out there for anyone who wants to do something similar. So first I want to go over the Kohler engine wiring, and that is these wires are coming out of it here. This yellow wire coming out, this is an accessory wire. These green and white wires hooked together. The green is an oil wire, oil sensor wire, and the white is a coil shutdown wire. So if this sees low oil pressure, it shuts the engine down. The blue wire is ignition in wire. Red wire is ignition power wire. And this greenish, what used to be purple wire, is charge wire from the magneto. So one thing that I had a hard time figuring out was this switch in here. So what you're looking at is the on-off switch for the cutter. So up is on, down is off. So you would think that there's only two wires going there, but what I found out is that is not the case. So what happens is the red wire that is tied into the hour meter, that is what I am getting power from off the accessory circuit from the engine. The purple wire coming out off the bottom, that is power to the clutch, the magnetic clutch. Then the black wire on the right hand side of the bottom, that is power for the auto sweep system. So that made sense. On the left hand side you have the green and you have the blue wire. So what those wires do is that they are they interrupt the starter solenoid circuit, so that when the switch is in the on position, the starter won't turn on, the engine won't turn on. I had a hell of a time trying to figure that out because I was racking my brain. You know, it's an on-off switch, why does it have 4 wires? And that's why, because it's a safety on-off system for the starter. And so when you have the switch in the on position, it interrupts the wire to the starter, so you aren't able to start the engine. What also is important is the signal wire out of the auto sweep. So the white wire in the middle, that's the signal wire out of the auto sweep. Top purple wire, that's power. Black wire is ground. The bottom 2 wires are what go over to the auto sweep solenoid over there and control it. Now, according to the manual, they want you to interrupt the magneto circuit from one of the coils to power the auto sweep. So that's what this setup is here. I used a little jumper push together connector. So I'm not a fan of this setup. but allegedly that's how it was from stock. So I'm just putting it back to stock. I think there's probably a better way to do it. They probably found a better way in the future, but right now that's not it. So now that I have everything taken care of, I have gas in the tank. I topped off the hydraulic fluid, although I need to do that again. I'm going to see if I can get this thing to stay running with the filter on instead of giving it a little go-go juice spray, and then see if I can get all the functions to operate correctly and get the wheel to turn. So let's try it out. That's pretty good. Keeps backfiring and popping. And I see exhaust coming out here, so I think that maybe it just needs to run. I don't know. I do have a hydraulic oil leak. So, as you can see, very wet down there. And that's coming off of that pressure line for the up and down circuit. Oh, and we got a leak up here too, in the auto solenoid. So there's a leak. There's a leak coming from somewhere. Let's see if there's any leaks, because it wasn't driving forward and backward. I'm not sure why. Alright, so I don't see any leaks on the hydro unit underneath, which is a good sign. But I do unfortunately have some leaks here that need to be dealt with. And unfortunately, I think that's... I don't think it's going to be tightening up fittings leaks. I think they are... It's the hose itself is leaking. So that's unfortunate, but not unrepairable. So I will get the problem hoses off and have them remade. So over the past week or so, I have been doing some work off camera on the stump grinder. I did find that there were a few hydraulic lines that were leaking and needed to be replaced every time I start up the engine. So I got all those replaced, and while I was running it, trying to find all the leaks in the hydraulic system, I realized that the engine wasn't running quite as well as it should. So I narrowed down what I think are some of the problems with it, and now I'm going to fix those issues that I found. Starting first with the missing exhaust gaskets on the muffler. There is a leak across the one side, and as I look at the bolts here, they are different sized bolts, so I do think that someone has had this off in the past. So it's now time to take this off, put new gaskets on, put it back together using the correct hardware. So I have gotten the exhaust manifold off. The one exhaust gasket was blown off on the top. That's where I saw it leaking before. The other exhaust gasket was completely missing. So they just relied on trying to make a tight seal between the exhaust manifold flange and the head. What I also found is that on one of the outputs they had used two English bolts, whereas on the stock setup there are supposed to be two studs opposed to bolts. It looks like putting the English thread through the metric opening in the head has not terribly gacked up the threads too much. I think I should be able to just thread in the new stud without much problem. I was going to replace the other two existing studs that were in there, Unfortunately, they do seem to be very well in there, and opposed to risk breaking off a stud or mangling it so bad that I need to get it out. The threads are in relatively good condition. There's no excess rust on the studs, so I will just leave those in there, and I will make sure to put never seize on all the threads so that the next person that needs to do service on this engine will be thanking me. All right, the next repair item I need to do, it is going to be easier to do with the air filter off, air filter housing. So I'm just going to undo 4 bolts real quick, and this whole bracket will come off, and it should be able to lift right up out of the way. All right, so what I noticed when I was running it is that when you are trying to run this at full throttle, you pull it into the full throttle position and it just doesn't stay there because there's a little indent, if you can see that, where the full throttle position rides, and it's just old and worn out and it just doesn't stay in that indent. So as you're using the stump grinder, it will slowly start to go and lose throttle. So what I have done is I have purchased a new throttle cable assembly from Kohler to replace the old one. And this is here what it looks like. This does not have the sticker on it, but this will be a nice replacement for our worn out one. And you can already tell that it is very difficult to get out of that full throttle position. So this will work very well. To take it off, all I have to do is take off this little clamp here. All right, so the last thing I need to do is I need to replace this fuel pump because it does have a crack right here on the inlet, and I believe that is where air is being sucked into the system, so the carburetor isn't being provided with enough fuel so that it runs without surging. So first thing I need to do is I need to take off all of the existing fuel pump system, and with this design Kohler engine, the fuel pump is built right into the valve cover end. So I did get a whole new valve cover end assembly, and we'll put that on. So you can see the fuel pump setup inside there, just operating a little diaphragm. Alright, so I have my new fittings installed. New gasket installed on the back side. I'm ready to install this now. Like such. They give you new hex bolts. Our fixes did work. The engine is running a lot better. The throttle control is much better than it used to be, and I'm not getting any excess exhaust fumes coming out from between the muffler flange and the head. Our stump grinder is now back together. Engine's back where it should be. Everything runs and functions as it should. Hydraulic lines are repaired. All the functions work as they should, and this stump grinder is ready to go back to work. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this episode. If you did, please remember to like and subscribe the video. It really helps me out, and thanks for watching.